as was said, I'm here to talk a little bit about how we actually build idle games, but then also what we do with them after they are live in the market. And Mike talked a little bit about his definition of live ops, and he had this list of what live ops is not for him. And actually, I think we tick all of those boxes because all of that for us is actually live ops. Anyway, so we are Kolibri Games. We do idle games. I'm Daniel Stammler, co-CEO and one of the co-founders. And we have those two games, which some of you might know, Idle Miner Tycoon and Idle Factory Tycoon. Idle Miner Tycoon was our first game. We released it in July 2016, after 2 months of initial development. Idle Factory Tycoon is our newer game that we just launched last year. And together both games have more than 60 million downloads and more than 10 million monthly active users. So what is our approach actually? And before I want to go deeper into how we build things, I want to talk a little bit about the game industry as a business. And as you all know, the gaming industry is a hit-driven business. What does this mean? This means that many, many big projects with big hopes will fail in the end because the games will not work out and people will not play them, or if they play them, not pay for them. And this is a huge risk for the industry because, as you can imagine, if you spend millions into building a game and it does not work out, this can put out studios out of business. So for us, we figured out we should learn as fast as possible if the thing we're doing, if the game that we're building is actually something that players want to play, instead of investing a lot of time and energy into it and then finding that out maybe too late. So that's why we try to find out as fast as possible if we should continue or not. Now, how do we actually do that? This is the example of Idle Factory Tycoon, the second game. And the very first iteration consists of basically text boxes. So we think about the game mechanic. Our games are very mechanic driven. So we try to build that into boxes and then we actually play the game. And if the game is not fun at all in that stage, and if we cannot imagine the game to be good or to become good, we will stop there. And in this stage, it's maybe like 1 week of development or so. If it's fun, we go on and build some basic graphics, because for every game, of course, you need kind of like a setting to make it useful. We play it again. If it works, we go on, iterate on mechanics, iterate on graphics, and then in the end, we finalize the UX, the graphics. However, this is all within the first 8 weeks. So when I talk about finalizing UX mechanics, it doesn't mean to polish them with data and everything, but just finalize them to the stage where we think it's good enough to release it to some players and learn if the game itself has some value in it or not. And while this process seems very obvious and looks kind of easy, for us it was really, really hard to actually follow through with it because, as you know, when you build a game, you have so many ideas about what you want to build in the game. And there are so many things where you are very sure that if you implement them into the game will be better. And yes, you might be true. The game would probably be better if you implement multiplayer, if you implement Facebook, if you implement more levels. But it's super important to remember that the goal here is not to build a very good game, but the goal here is to build a game with which you can test if you should actually spend the time to make the game better. So it's really, really important in the end to say no to a lot of things. On the example of Idle Miner Tycoon, saying no meant, for example, not having cloud save. So we had players in the beginning with the early version that lost their save game. We had players that left the game because we didn't have any social features. And also there was no localization. The game was only in English, and we didn't even build in the localization framework because this would have cost us like a few days, which are not necessary to test if the game is worth investing further into it or not. We had no in-app purchases, and this was actually something where people out of the industry told us like, hey guys, you will burn through your first cohorts, you will not earn any money with them, but we are totally okay with that. We do not get the first downloads to earn money with them, but we get the first downloads to validate if the game works or not. And then, of course, if the game works, there's still enough time and there will be many, many millions of players later on that we could monetize. So you should not be scared of burning through players. This also applies to no long-term motivation. So the game was basically finished after 1 or 2 days for hardcore players. And then they, of course, quit the game and deleted it and probably never downloaded the game again. But that's fine, because in the end, it's not about building a great game in that stage, but it's about building a great core gameplay. and not building anything that's not related to the core gameplay. Now, of course, if you have that MVP, you need to somehow measure it if you want to spend more energy, build a proper team, or if you rather want to kill it and try something new. So for us, we had two mechanics to measure it. One organic was on the marketing side, if we get any organic downloads, to see if there's like an organic appeal on the market, if players actually look for that kind of game. And the second important thing for us was the day one retention, meaning do players actually come back on the second day, or do they forget about the game or not? And with both games we got lucky and got a day one retention of 75%, which for us meant, okay, this game is something, even though we had no daily rewards, no push notifications, so there was no extrinsic motivation for players to come back, but they just came back on their own. So we knew this core gameplay actually works. There is something in the game, and now we can start building a proper game, a big game with in-app purchases and with levels and so on onto it. When we do this process, the first important thing is to have a small team. So for us, it's basically one product manager who's responsible for the team, one game designer, one artist, and one developer. And the reason why the team is so small is because they are agile. If you have a small team, they will not discuss everything for hours, but they will just go through with everything. You need to cover, of course, every core area of the game. For our games, it's development, art, and game design. I think this is true for most of the games out there. But then you have just one person for each area, and this person should just go through with it and not discuss everything for weeks and try things out. Because if you do that, then in the end you will not be able to test the game after 8 weeks, but then it will take you years or at least half a year or so to validate your idea. Second step, minimum viable product. I talked about it, what the minimum viable product means for us, but it's basically a playable version that you can then test and play internally. Then everybody plays the game, we go on to polish it, to fix critical bugs, and after those 8 weeks we release the game. And there it's important for us to reach a broad number of players. So what we did with Idle Factory Tycoon was to release it on Google Play with another developer account. The reason for the other developer account was first to not bias our organic downloads because of Idle Miner Tycoon. Because of course, if you release with the same developer account, you will get downloads because players know your first game and then they will just see it in the list. And the second reason was because of course Idle Miner Tycoon by now is a big game, it's very successful, and our players of Idle Miner Tycoon have a certain they expect some kind of game. And Idle Factory, after 8 weeks, of course, that's not that kind of game. So we wanted to release it with another account to not disappoint players, but to get actual market feedback. And then after those 4 weeks, we got our retention numbers, we saw the organic downloads, and we knew, okay, this game has the potential to become big. And then that's when actually scaling starts. And then that's when live ops or proper game development, however you want to call it, starts for us. We do this with weekly updates. This is something that is rather uncommon in the industry. I think it is super important to be close to the players and to reduce the time from feature development to market, because we don't want to work on something big for multiple months and then release it and then see if it works out or not. So here we apply the same thinking of the MVP to every update, to see and to be able to react to each update very fast if it's not working out as we expected it. With Idle Miner Tycoon, we had over 120 updates by now. And for us, this is the definition of games as a service. For us, a game is not finished when we release it, but for us, a game is a constant service that will never be finished as long as players play the game. We continue improving it, we continue doing live op events, new feature development, new game mechanics, new monetization, everything. So if you look at the game of when we released it in July 2016, it was very, very small compared to what it's now. Now it's probably 20 times bigger in terms of features. And this will also continue forever as long as there are players actually playing it. To do one update per week, you need to be very focused on pushing it out. You cannot let a few days pass without actually delivering, because then in the end it will be longer. So for us, each update is one sprint and 1 week. Of course, like it happens in reality, sometimes you're faster, sometimes you're slower. Then we will extend the sprint by a day or two or finish it earlier. But in the end, every sprint for us is has a deliverable that we will push out to the market. And this also helps the teams to really focus on building everything for the players and not building internal sprints that will never be released and full of bugs. Because I think then if you have, like, for example, an update cycle of 2 months with sprint cycles of 1 week, then the first few sprints will not be user-oriented, but they will be more like not polished, have bugs, and then in the end, in the last few sprints, you will have to catch up with all of that. So for us, 1 sprint is 1 update, 1 week. Now, if you want to do that, there are a few things that need to be in place. So first, we need to decide about feature design early on. So before the sprint starts, game design and art already talked about what should be in the sprint, how we should do this. Of course, they will still continue in the sprint and assist the developers for smaller decisions, but the core idea is there. And now another very important concept that we implemented was to have QA testing the game while developers are still developing on the sprint. So for us, it's not like we're developing for 5 days and then QA starts to test it, but from the very first day, QA starts to test everything that's there. Like on the first day, they will start to create their test maps. Then when the first push is done from the developers, they will already test it continuously. And with this, we can ensure that there will not be this huge gap at the end of the sprint where QA tests, finds some bugs, needs to go back to the dev team, and the dev team is already on the next sprint, and then this will create a lot of chaos. So for us, the sprint end is basically 1 smoke test that takes like an hour or so, and if that goes well, which it usually does because everything is tested continuously, then we can release the sprint in the game. Now, to be that fast, I believe technology and continuous integration is really important to support the development process. If you do like 1 update every 3 months, it's not that big of a hassle to build the build, send it to QAs, push it to the devices. If you do it weekly, I think you should really build some tech to have every commit built and automatically pushed onto your devices. Otherwise, there will be so much manual work and so many errors due to repeating the same thing again and again. We do this by using Jenkins. Every commit that is pushed to Git will be built in Jenkins and then will automatically be pushed to all of our test devices. So that QA has, like it usually takes like 10 to 15 minutes for 1 build. So 15 minutes after a developer changed something in the game, somebody out of QA will have it on the device and will be able to test it already. And then another step that's also important for us is to not only automate the internal process, but also automate the upload and the deployment to Google Play and Apple. Because we had many issues when doing this manually, and it's a lot of work, a lot of hassle. You do wrong things, you upload the wrong APK. This kind of stuff happens, as you know. So for us, it was important to automate it and then put it into staged rollout. Now, staged rollout is a concept that works very well with the lean approach. Because with staged rollout, you are able to release your update to only a very small number of players in the first few days or in the first day. So what we do is we release every update to 1% of players first, and we have around like 1.5 million daily active users. So with 1%, we already get, if I calculate correctly, 15,000 users, which is enough to figure out really bad technical bugs and technical issues. If we don't find any there, we move on to 5%. There we can then also find like not so critical issues, but still issues with the update. We got to 20%, and with 20% we're already able to gather player feedback. Like our community team will actively ask players that have the new version, hey, what do you think about that update? We will screen the store for comments with that new version. And this is the point where we are also able to roll the update back if the feature that we built isn't as good as we expected and the players don't like it. And then if everything runs smooth, we roll it out to 100% and then also push it out to iOS. And I think by now, iOS or Apple released a feature to do something similar. And I think our teams are testing that right now to also have the phased rollout on iOS. Now, a little bit about how we actually do this regarding our tech stack. So crash reporting is done with Fabric, early basic analytics like retention, daily active users with Fabric. I think Fabric is owned by Google now, so there might be some changes. I think it will be integrated into Firebase. But for us, Fabric was also in our MVP. It's super easy to integrate, and you get the retention, you get your daily active user numbers, and you get crash reporting. Now, once we implemented in-app purchases, we had to have in-app purchase validation, because otherwise all your analytics are completely wrong due to cheaters. We're using PlayFab for that. Iron Source for ad mediation, OneSignal for push nodes, PlayFab again for cloud save. Eventually, of course, you want your players to have to be able to save their save game in the cloud. If they get new devices, if they play over multiple years, you need to have this. And then when it comes to scale, AppsFlyer for marketing or marketing attribution, PlayFab for live up events, GetSocial for social invites, and then Azure for our data platform, and then in the future for machine learning. When we founded the company, we had no idea how to build games. So we, of course, as the founding team, played games as consumers, but we never worked in a gaming company. Only one of us ever heard of Unity and tried it out, so we didn't know how to build games. We only knew how to play games, basically. So for us, from the very beginning, it was super important to get as much player feedback as possible. We really had no idea, and we thought our players, if we asked them, if we really engage with them, they're going to tell us what they like and what they do not like. And here, of course, there's a common misconception. So it's not like we do everything our players tell us. If they tell us like, hey, your in-app purchases are too expensive, you should make the game easier, of course we're not going to just do it. But the important thing there is to really try to understand why players want certain things, why players play our game, or why players do not play our game. And with that knowledge, we are able to then adjust our game based on the understanding of our players. And so basically we're not doing what the players tell us, but we're solving the issues for the players by thinking about what their actual issue is. And with that approach, we're pretty successful so far. So on Google Play, we have 4.8 stars. And last time I checked, from the top 500 downloaded or most downloaded games, we were in the top 5 based on the player or on the ranking. So it looks like this approach there is working. The hard part, of course, is what do you do with that quantitative player feedback, because you have thousands of players telling you every week what they want to do in the game, what they like, what they do not like, and it's super hard to get that feedback to the product teams and to the developers. So what we do is we have a weekly community presentation where the community managers sit down with the developers and the product managers and the game designers to show them what the players like and what the players do not like, and have this kind of like quantified list where they then are able to show it on one slide, basically. And one thing there, of course, is to have a list to prioritize, but I think the even more important thing there is to basically connect the community with the developers. Because it's really, really easy as a development team to just sit there, not really connect to players, and have no idea what the players actually want. And with having this regular update meeting, everybody needs to see, everybody will see what the players like about the game, but also what the players hate about the game. And with this, they are far more connected to the players and will, I believe, in the end, make better product decisions. So how does this actually look like in the timeline? This is the example of Idle Miner Tycoon. No. So when we released the first version in 2016, it basically had only one mine, and players finished it after a day or two. Then it was clear after we saw the retention numbers, okay, the first thing we should do is build something in the game so that players can actually continue playing. And we did this before we implemented in-app purchases. Then the second thing, we are a company, we want to earn money, we wanted to hire more people, move into a proper office and so on. So it was clear for us we have to implement a shop. This is what we did then in 2016, at the end of 2016. Then we earned proper money. We were able to hire people. It wasn't only the co-founding team, but like actual programmers and actual artists that we hired. And then we had the capacities to do things like live up events. So in the beginning, we started to really build it manually, to ship one update where players had to download the update, and then they were able to build or to play that weekly event. By now, of course, this is all automated. And like Mike said, there are many, many things you should do when you do events. We built a social light feature, which helped us with downloads and retentions. It's not like a proper clan system, but you can go on expeditions with your friends. We implemented this year then the mainland and the super managers, where we added multiple more points of content and basically a repeatable game with an RPG element. So that's it. Are there any questions? Yeah.
With staged rollouts, how do you manage players talking to each other about those features?
So this happens, of course, some players post it on Reddit, in the forums, wherever. And what we basically do is we explain our players the process. We tell them that we do a staged rollout, that not everybody will get the same version at the same time. And while there are always some players that don't care about that and are just hating, I have the feeling that most of our players understand that and are totally fine with that. But that's also a good sign for us if we see, okay, players really want the new update because they heard from others that it's going to be awesome. So we then know, okay, there's a hype about it and it's probably something good. Yep.
Do you do A/B testing, and where does it fit into that?
So for now, we only do A/B testing on the store, not in the game yet. But this is something that we're going to tackle this year.
I guess you kill quite many games or prototypes, but what is the point in development when you do that? It's like just after a few weeks of initial development, or like already in soft launch, or?
So the first point where games are supposed to be killed is after the 8-week release. If you push it on the market and you see your day 1 retention is bad, nobody wants that game, then it's, I think, clear. And then the second point is during soft launch, if you're then not able to get day 7, day 30 retention, if you're not able to get proper monetization, I think then you should also kill the game.
So if you commit for 8 weeks at least?
Yes. Or, I mean, if the very first iteration is bad, then of course not. Yeah.
How do you fit larger updates in the weekly update?
So we basically split it up then in multiple updates. For some features, you're logically able to release it. So sometimes when we had the mainland mines, there was a certain reward. So we implemented the mains, but the reward was useless for now. And then later we shipped the rewards. And for some others, we do hidden updates that are not shipped.